The date is November 26, 1987. The Richfield Coliseum in Ohio crackles with raw energy as wrestling history unfolds before 21,000 screaming fans. The inaugural Survivor Series, Vince McMahon's bold gambit to counter-program the Starrcade on Thanksgiving night, has reached its climactic moment. Bodies litter the ringside area like fallen gladiators. The ring canvas tells the story of carnage. 10 tag teams entered this elimination gauntlet, but now only 4 men remain standing. The crowd erupts as they realize what has just transpired. Against all odds, 2 teams from the same side have emerged victorious from the chaos. First, the seasoned veterans known as the Killer Bees, Jim Brunzell and B. Brian Blair, masked warriors who've navigated the treacherous waters of sports entertainment for years. And celebrating alongside them, catching their breath and surveying the battlefield they've somehow survived together, stand 2 young men who, just 8 months earlier, were nothing more than human crash test dummies for wrestling's elite. Roma and Jim Powers of the Young Stallions. The crowd watches in amazed jubilation as these apparent nobodies, these enhancement talents who were supposed to lose and make others look good, raise their arms in triumph alongside their veteran teammates. Roma's dark hair gleams with perspiration, his muscular frame betraying none of the exhaustion that should consume a man who's just outlasted Strikeforce, the Hart Foundation, Demolition, and 5 other established teams. The parallels to another underdog story resonated through the arena that night, though few could have recognized them in real time. Just over a decade earlier, yet still firmly implanted in the collective consciousness, a fictional boxer named Rocky Balboa had captured America's imagination by going the distance with Apollo Creed, transforming from a Philadelphia nobody into a symbol of perseverance. Now, in the squared circle of professional wrestling, 2 real-life underdogs were living their own version of that mythic tale. Young, hungry, and handsome specimens who'd clawed their way from the bottom of the card to share in wrestling immortality alongside their veteran teammates. But unlike Rocky's story, this one would end not with triumph, but with burial, and the man wielding the shovel would be none other than Vincent Kennedy McMahon himself. The Young Stallions' journey to that fateful November night began in the shadows of mediocrity, where careers go to die and dreams are systematically dismantled. In March 1987, Roma and Powers were thrown together in what wrestling insiders call enhancement talent. Working athletes whose primary function was to make established stars appear dominant. They were human sacrificial lambs, expected to bump and sell and lose with dignity while collecting modest paychecks for their troubles. Their first pairing came at a Las Vegas taping, where they faced the dominant force of Demolition, Axe and Smash, the up-and-coming most devastating tag team in the company. Roma and Powers lost as expected. They lost again to the new Dream Team. They lost to combinations of Butch Reed, Iron Sheik, and Nikolai Volkov. Loss after loss accumulated like storm clouds on the horizon of their careers. But something curious began happening as spring turned to summer. These 2 enhancement talents, these professional losers, started showing flashes of something more. Roma carried himself with the swagger of a star, his movements fluid and confident even in defeat. Powers possessed a different energy entirely, quieter, grittier, the kind of determined intensity that resonated with working-class fans who saw their own struggles reflected in his methodical approach to the craft. Their first significant breakthrough came in the most unlikely of venues, Madison Square Garden, wrestling's hallowed cathedral. On May 18, 1987, Roma and Powers achieved what seemed impossible, a clean victory over established veterans Bob Orton and Don Muraco. The win would later air on primetime wrestling, giving national television audiences their first glimpse of something special brewing between the 2 young stallions. As summer progressed, their momentum built like a symphony approaching crescendo. They defeated the Shadows on television. They began winning house show matches against established competition. But the real watershed moment came on August 8, 1987, when they faced the reigning tag team champions, the Hart Foundation, in a non-title match. Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart weren't just champions. They were Vince McMahon's hand-picked representatives of tag team excellence. Yet the Young Stallions won. It was a victory so stunning that even seasoned wrestling observers had to recalibrate their expectations. Enhancement talent simply didn't defeat tag team champions even in non-title scenarios. But Roma and Powers had done exactly that, and suddenly the wrestling world was forced to take notice of these two previously anonymous performers. Their ascension continued through the late summer, with victories over teams that had previously dominated them. They defeated Kamala and Sika via countout on an episode of Superstars. They beat the Hart Foundation again by disqualification on Primetime Wrestling. Each victory added another layer to their growing legend, another reason for fans to invest emotionally in their unlikely rise. It was around this time that fate, or perhaps Vince McMahon's showmanship instincts, gifted them with their moniker. During a match, play-by-play commentator McMahon himself referred to the duo as a couple of young stallions, and the name stuck with the organic inevitability of all great wrestling appellations. The Young Stallions had acquired not just a team name, but an identity that perfectly captured their youthful energy and unbridled potential. They inherited the entrance music initially intended for the Hart Foundation, Crank It Up, a driving rock anthem that seemed custom-designed for their increasingly confident ring entrances. They earned their first Saturday night's main event appearance, wrestling's equivalent of primetime television stardom. Though they lost narrowly to the Hart Foundation in that October showcase, the match itself represented validation. McMahon was investing television time in their development, and then came Survivor Series, their crowning achievement and the pinnacle of their improbable rise. In a match featuring 10 of the Federation's most established tag teams, the Young Stallions not only survived, they thrived. They eliminated Greg Valentine and Dino Bravo, the new Dream Team, with Roma hitting a picture-perfect diving sunset flip. When the dust settled and the final pin was counted, Roma and Powers stood triumphant alongside the Killer Bees as the surviving members of their team, having outlasted legends and champions alike in a stunning team victory. For one shining moment, the Rocky Balboa parallel seemed complete. Two unknown fighters had gone the distance against impossible odds, proving that heart and determination could triumph over reputation and politics. The wrestling world seemed to lie at their feet, ripe for conquest. But wrestling, unlike Hollywood movies, doesn't always reward its underdogs with happy endings. The cracks in their foundation began appearing almost immediately. At the 1988 Royal Rumble, they lost decisively to the Islanders in a best-of-3 falls match, with Roma suffering what appeared to be a legitimate knee injury. Though they continued winning on house shows through the early months of 1988, something fundamental had shifted in the company's perception of their value. Behind the scenes, whispers began circulating about tension between the team members themselves. Roma and Powers, despite their undeniable chemistry in the ring, reportedly couldn't stand each other outside of it. The swagger and intensity that made them compelling performers apparently extended into personal animosity, creating backstage friction that McMahon and his team found increasingly problematic. More significantly, the wrestling landscape itself was evolving around them. The company was transitioning toward larger-than-life characters, cartoon personas that could transcend traditional wrestling audiences and appeal to mainstream entertainment consumers. Hulk Hogan's All-American Superhero Act had proven the viability of this approach, and McMahon was systematically reshaping his roster to emphasize spectacle over athletic credibility. In this new paradigm, the Young Stallions' greatest strengths became liabilities. Their natural athleticism and believable personas made them seem almost mundane compared to the colorful characters McMahon was prioritizing. They were too real for a company increasingly committed to fantasy. The final nail in their coffin came with the arrival of another young tag team in late May 1988. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, collectively known as the Rockers. Here was everything McMahon wanted in his new wrestling landscape. Flashier presentation, more dynamic personalities, and perhaps most importantly, genuine friendship between the team members. The Rockers offered all of the Young Stallions' athletic credibility, with none of their backstage complications. McMahon's interest in Roma and Powers evaporated like morning mist. By summer 1988, they were losing to teams they'd previously defeated. The Bolsheviks, whom they dominated during their peak, suddenly began beating them regularly. They even lost to the Conquistadors, masked jobbers who represented the absolute bottom of the tag team hierarchy. At the 1988 Survivor Series, exactly 1 year after their greatest triumph, the Young Stallions were among the first teams eliminated, a humiliating reversal of fortune that seemed designed to erase any lingering memories of their previous success. Their final months as a team played out like a slow-motion car crash. Victories became increasingly rare, partnerships increasingly sporadic. By 1989, Roma and Powers were wrestling together only occasionally, their team existing more in memory than reality. Their last victory came in June 1989 against Boris Zhukov and Barry Horowitz. Enhancement talent defeating enhancement talent in wrestling's cruel circular hierarchy. Their final match as the Young Stallions occurred on August 7, 1989, a loss to the powers of pain on primetime wrestling. There was no angle to explain their dissolution, no storyline to provide closure. They simply stopped existing as a unit, fading into wrestling's collective unconscious, like a half-remembered dream. Paul Roma would eventually find some measure of success as part of Power and Glory, alongside Hercules, turning heel and adopting the cartoonish persona that McMahon preferred. He'd even face his former partner Jim Powers in singles competition, winning all 6 of their encounters in August 1990. A final indignity that completed their fall from grace. Powers himself would linger in the Federation until 1994, occasionally forming temporary partnerships but never recapturing the magic of his Stallions days. In the end, the Young Stallions became exactly what they'd been designed to be from the beginning. A footnote in wrestling history, enhancement talent whose brief moment of glory served only to highlight the success of others. Their rise and fall perfectly encapsulated the arbitrary nature of sports entertainment success. How quickly heroes could be manufactured, and how easily they could be discarded when their usefulness expired. Unlike Rocky Balboa, whose fictional journey culminated in triumph and vindication, the Young Stallions discovered that real-world underdogs don't always get their happy endings. Sometimes, the man controlling the narrative decides that your story has run its course. And sometimes, the most compelling comeback story is the one that Vince McMahon never allows to be written. The Young Stallions seemingly had everything: the look, the talent, and the chemistry. What they didn't have was the one thing that mattered most in Vince McMahon's empire: his sustained interest. That made all the difference between immortality and irrelevance, between legend and footnote, between Rocky Balboa and 2 forgotten jobbers buried into oblivion.